Hello, everybody, and welcome to the reality show brought to you by the Ayn Rand Center UK, where we apply the practical philosophy of objectivism to everything. We are in, I think, day 138 of the Israel war in Gaza, somewhere in there. And we have a couple of topics today that are disturbing to me. I'm sure my esteemed panel here are going to find them equally disturbing and have very interesting things to say about them. The first topic is the new hearings in the International Court of Justice concerning whether Israel is colonizing Palestinian territory and enforcing apartheid. And this is a separate case brought by South Africa. Thank you. Again, they are, of course, the conscience of the world community. And this is a product of a vote from the UN from 2022. Now, 52 countries will be speaking at this hearing, which started on Monday and 10%ed yesterday. The broad point they all made is that Israel is committing violations of its obligations under international law. At worst, this means colonialism and apartheid, and should pay reparations and give assurances of non-repetition. That's the first topic. That's already getting my goat. The second topic is the IDF has discovered over $250 million in Khan Yunis in recent days. What? You mean Hamas is stealing money? And this is after, of course, huge sums were found in various currencies in November. The wealth of Hamas and its leadership is strange, considering they aren't exactly a productive society. So let's deal with this first topic at hand, guys. First of all, welcome. Welcome to the reality show. Thanks for joining me here. What do you guys think of the International Court of Justice? Of course, this decision, whatever they make, is not binding. Not even their binding decisions are really binding, since they have no way of executing whatever judgment they come across. But what do you think of this accusation that Israel is creating an apartheid state and reacting, particularly in the West Bank, with the type of uh, unmitigated prejudice and hostility that is a violation of international law? Robert, I'll start first with you. What do you think of this?
Well, my first reaction was, and you mentioned a call for reparations. Uh, what rights do Israelis have in Arabic lands? How are Jews welcomed into these so-called occupied territories communities? There's a disproportionality going on here. There's disproportionate hatred and disproportionate recognition of individual rights, disproportionate recognition of women's rights, of minority rights, of gay rights. Yes, absolutely, there's something unjust going on here. So the IKCIJ, the International Kangaroo Court of Injustice, should look into this. I wish they would do it honestly and objectively and shine a spotlight into exactly what's going on in that regard. The only reparations that Israel owes anybody is to establish a state where, regardless of whether you're Jewish or Arabic or Muslim, your rights. Oh, wait, they already did that. So, yes, I'm simultaneously outraged and bored. I'm outraged at these actions, and yet I'm bored at the IKCIJ. And you're right, they have no teeth, but unfortunately, they do have PR power. So my hope is that what comes out of this is what is similar to what came out of the ICJ actions initially in South Africa, which is no, we really can't find you guilty of it. We'll throw a few, words out there suggesting you should be doing better, but no, you're actually not guilty.
I wish they would have said that more clearly. Michael, what are your thoughts on this?
I too am bored with it. I don't know about if bored is the right word. Exhausted, because it's like a war of attrition. They never stop with the criticisms of Israel, the out of context attacks. The very article that we read said that in this hearing, they're not addressing history or politics or anything like that. Well, of course, if you're not going to add a context and you're going to say, oh my God, look, they have troops here, they bombed here, of course it's going to look horrible because you're not adding anything to it. Mark punches me in the face, and all I show is a video of Mark punching me in the face, and I say, look how horrible Mark is. But it turns out that I've been harassing him for 6 months on the telephone, and then saw him and threw water on him, kicked him in the shin, and then he hit me, and all of a sudden things change. It's understandable. But really, the exhaustion factor in like on social media, I'm bombarded with it. It's just nonstop on how evil the Jews are, how horrible it is. And of course, they don't like to say that they just hate Jews. Some do, don't get me wrong. There's those out there that do, but it's no, we're just anti-Zionism, we're anti-Israel, and it's just there's no philosophy behind it. There's no rational ethics. And even on the side of Israel, the people that argue, a lot of that is just religious based. So that's not rational either. And it's just at the point where I'm like beaten down by the whole thing, to be perfectly honest with you.
It's exhausting because they don't give up
It's
and they don't change their messaging because they know that once the message is out there, it's out there forever. And you're going to get tired eventually. Natan, I mean, this mostly concerns the West Bank, from what I understand. And the West Bank it's a very complicated situation over there. What do you make of this? Because Israel's taking some military action in the West Bank because clearly there are terrorists over there that are, you know, and Hamas sympathizers. I see pictures every day on social media of houses being razed in the West Bank and the accusation that it's a colonialistic type of takeover, that they're just trying to make the West Bank their own, quote unquote. Now, I frankly think they won it in 1967, but that's just me. That's what happens in war when you attack the innocent people and then they take that territory, then theirs. But this is considered an occupation that's been negotiated through the Oslo Accords to some crazy political machinations going on. Can you make heads or tails of this or explain it a little more for audiences in America?
Right. So I hope you don't mind. I think it was yesterday I saw that Peter Schwartz on Twitter, he posted an essay that he wrote about Israel and Gaza from 2014. Okay, now I hope you don't mind. I want to read this, just the first paragraph of this essay, because I think this just is absolutely spot on. So, okay, the essay is titled Altruism, the Gaza War, and the Law of Causality. Okay, and I'm quoting. When someone is killed because, say, a hurricane made his roof cave in, journalists understand the need to explain that occurrence. They don't simply report that Mr. Jones died when a heavy beam fell on his skull. Rather, they report that a hurricane blew in the roof, thereby making the beam fall. Perhaps they tell us about previous deaths, as well as expected future ones resulting from the storm. That is, the news reports focus on the primary cause of Mr. Jones' death. Okay, I'm ending quote. So now from here he says, okay, so, a guy dies like that in a storm, the media will know to report that the storm was the cause, not just the beam falling on his head. Yet when they go to Gaza and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, there's no law of causality. It's just things just happen. They just go midstream. They just start from there and they show you, okay, so you have, the Israel Defense Forces, they put up checkpoints in the West Bank, and these Palestinians, they can't drive, beyond a certain point, and they can't get to the sea, and they can't just do whatever they want. And I don't know, there's like quotas on Palestinian workers inside of Israel, and all these things that they, of course, they can show, and these are actual facts, but they're just showing you the beam that's falling on the head. They don't show you the cause. They don't ask, well, why is this happening? Like, you know, just if you're just a regular person and you hear this and you go, oh my God, why is this happening? Why is Israel there? Why is the IDF there? Well, yeah, there's a reason. Just actually go and research the topic, and don't just start from there. And that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing at the ICJ. I mean, this is what it's all about. They just start midstream. They don't care about the causes. And I really urge people to read this essay. This is just a splendid, amazing essay. He really condenses like the whole thing in, I don't know, less than maybe 1,000 words. And I mean, and the reason, I mean, he goes fully into, so the reason behind, like, why don't people actually look for the cause? I mean, they should care at least to know, right? I mean, any just person who is slightly honest and cares about reality, and if he cares to understand why things happen as they happen, he would look into the facts, into the deep causes. But the thing is, people embraced the code of ethics of altruism, and altruism is the code of ethics that rejects the law of causality. It just says that, look, if you're poor, or if you are, if you're suffering, that's it. There's that in itself causes, it's a moral claim on someone else who isn't suffering. And this explains why just the whole world is just, they're evading the facts, they're evading the causes of the conflict. They just see the Palestinians as these suffering people. They don't have, the economical strength that Israel has. So they just say, okay, so you're to blame. That's it. Like, that's all they need. And I mean, that shows you how sometimes ethics can actually influence the epistemology of people. So it actually causes them not to think. Um, so again, I urge people to read this, and yeah, I mean, I could go on and on. I mean, yeah.
I think that's a very powerful point. It's altruism is a rejection of causality, and certainly the Palestinian pro-Palestinian propaganda machine capitalizes on that tendency and culture, as do our own politicians here, who also capitalize on people's lack of curiosity about causality. But Robert, I want to throw something by you. I've noticed a disturbing trend on social media, and when I say trend, it's a trend of two, but two people unidentified. It could be the same person for all I know, because they hide behind the fake profiles, but they claim to be objectivists. And they claim that we are the ruination of objectivism, because we are evading certain truths with respect to Israel, primarily that Zionism is a collectivist ideology, and that Israel is not truly democratic in nature. And they will point to the various discriminatory laws for immigration to Israel to focus mainly on Jews. Now, I have come at these people with every bit of reasoning and historical precedent that I possibly could. They still seem to be unmoved. Have you noticed this? Have you noticed this disturbing trend in certain concrete bound? I have to say concrete bound objectivists, because that's what they seem like to me. Have you noticed this trend at all?
Yes and no. Yes and no. Yeah, yes, I've noticed it, but I don't see it as new at all. You may be seeing some voices getting louder, and I won't be surprised if they continue to get louder. But the intrinsicists have always been out there. And what I mean by that is the people who say objectivism should have won long ago, but our problem is our spokespeople haven't been doing right. And so they will look at a country like Israel, which is a religious country, it's a Jewish state, and say, well, then we shouldn't be supporting them. An idea like Israel is this little sliver, this little tiny sliver of Western civilization in the Middle East. The historical explanation, what happened to the Jews both before and after World War II, none of that matters to them. That's what I mean by intrinsicists. They're simplistic, and they're looking for somebody to blame. Now, I don't know the two accounts that you're talking about. I'd be interested to find out and take a look at them. My social media feeds are pretty well curated. I don't see quite as much ugliness as a lot of people do. But I would be curious to see. That's going to be my guess. Those people have always been out there. I can name groups like Ayn Rand's Eagles. Some people will know what I'm talking about. Other groups who say, no, ARI and the ARCUK, you guys, you're too weak, or you aren't principled enough. No surprise that half of these people are staunchly behind Donald Trump, at the same time as they say we need a more principled approach. So no, I haven't seen it, but I have seen it. I've seen it all along, and it doesn't surprise me that you're getting this. And it's one of the reasons why I say, in regard to the ICJ, our Court of Injustice, I wish they were a court of justice and could say, oh, here's what we found in the West Bank. In these cases, where Israelis have occupied so-called Palestinian properties. Oh, here was the reason for that. In this case, it was necessary, for example, to self-defense, because there's constant missiles being lobbed and they need to be able to set up self-defense apparatus. They may find
I
some
think they
cases where,
showed one recently. I think they showed one recently, a guy hanging out of his window and popping off like rocket propelled grenades at people, and then they blew up the house. But what you see on
yes,
social media is the idea of blowing up the house in the West Bank.
it's one of the
Exactly what
beautiful
Natan
things.
said.
One of the beautiful things, you mentioned Twitter being a cesspool, and it is, but one of the beautiful things is exactly the Israeli Defense Forces Twitter account. They share the information much more transparently than I think, even our own army does, and that may be ill-advised, but they understand. Unfortunately, for worse, for better or for worse, but just for worse, there's a publicity war out there, and to the extent they can show we are a force for justice. When we do these things, there are reasons we do these things. Again, it's why I wish the ICJ was actually doing what they claim to be doing. So, no, I haven't seen it getting worse, other than the news of the day is worse, and these crazies out there who sadly put on their objectivist t-shirt and claim the rest of us aren't fighting right. They've always
So
been out there.
I have to do a quick plug at this point because my partner and I, Ashley, who you probably know on this feed as Ashley Shrugged, she's created a t-shirt line called Galt's Gear, and she came up with this great shirt idea. There she is, giving us a $1.99, our Israel funding line. So we have a shirt called Freedom is Real, and with, of course, Israel with the is a play on Israel with the flag. And all of the proceeds from that shirt or hat or whatever, however you want to buy it, will go towards funding wounded soldiers from the IDF and victims of the October 7th massacre. So I just wanted to throw that out there for anybody listening. And Ashley just reminded me to do that even before I said it. Michael, what do you think of this objectivist trend of concrete bound folks who detach principle from reality and don't understand the way nation states work? One guy sent me a series of videos about how Israel's assassinated some official from England, during the mandate, and how terrorists like the Irgun, sort of took
Camp
over.
David Hotel, and on and on and on.
All of that
Right?
stuff, and as if there wasn't a civil war going on, as if
Yeah.
the mandate was protecting Jews, as if the Arabs weren't struggling for the very same things, as if this never happens in nation state history. In fact, the person said Israel is not a friend of the United States because it's betrayed it on several occasions, and I had to mention this several times. America has done the same to Israel. And George Washington's, of course, famous maxim that states are not friends, even when they're your allies. And America betrayed France, our greatest ally in the Revolutionary War, to make a separate peace with Britain. There is no such thing as friendship among nations, and even allies will be spying upon each other. So they use these examples that every nation state does, and I have to say, well, you're singling out Israel because you're an anti-Semite, clearly, but they try to avoid that. What do you think of this bullshit, man?
Okay. So for years and years, while incarcerated, I thought to myself, wow, it'd be really nice if I had an objectivist mentor, because everything that I was getting was all from books. Ayn Rand, Leonard Peikoff, Peter Schwartz essays, that type of thing, or, the criticisms I've read. But now that I'm out, I'm actually in some ways thankful that I've never been influenced by the various factions, because my mind and my sort of comprehension is purely from what Ayn Rand said or what Leonard Peikoff said. So I have it clearly distinguished. The idea, first of all, that we're blind to the idea that Zionism is collectivism is pure nonsense. We've talked about it on this show, that Israel in its founding was a collectivist, very religious, very socialist country. The question isn't whether Israel's perfect. The question is, what are we comparing it to? in this situation. And what we're comparing it to is a bunch of primitive barbarians who think it's okay to murder women and children and rape people, rape women toward political ends, who want to put us back living under Sharia law, from the 600s. And when you compare Israel to that, are they a perfect democracy? No. I just read yesterday, for instance, that they don't allow marriages between interfaith couples, or they won't recognize them. I think that's ridiculous. But nonetheless, they allow people get to vote. Their Arab citizens have the same rights as their Jewish citizens. Generally, they're a free country, freedom of speech, that sort of thing, freedom of trade, So that's why we defend them. Nobody on this show is out here saying, wow, Israel is this capitalist utopia full, it's basically Galt's Gulch, and that's why we're here defending it. So when these people come along and say things like that, first of all, they're not paying attention. Secondly, it's interesting to me because, as Robert pointed out, I'm guessing now, I don't know for certain because I don't know the accounts you're talking about, but usually these types are the Trump supporters who tell me that I'm too pure in my thinking, that I need to learn to pick the lesser of two evils and yada, 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 that sort of thing. But then when we defend Israel against barbarians, and by the way, from my perspective, I'm not saying the United States should be sending troops over there. And I'm not saying even that we should be sending them money or weapons, because I don't think we should. That's my personal viewpoint. I don't think there's an objectivist position on whether the United States should be supporting Israel with funds or arms. I do think that as an objectivist, you have to stand up for the country that actually lend them moral support, identify who is morally superior. And when it comes to the moral superiority, it's not even a question that Israel is morally superior to Hamas. They're morally superior to the barbarians in Saudi Arabia and Afghanistan, Iran, or any of these countries over there. And so that's my take on it.
When you're oriented around democratic principles as we understand them, where you have freedom of speech, freedom to petition your government, basic liberties and rights respected, there is always the possibility for positive change where the society can take the paradoxes that are in the society out of that society, as we did with slavery and as we continue to try to work out through our society. There is no similar institution that would enable that kind of change with the Palestinian people. What they need is to be completely defeated in order to completely renounce the ideology that they back. There is no other solution. Clearly, I know this based on their own action, since they refuse to surrender and since they refuse to renounce violence. But the apparatus is there in a free state for any paradoxes within it to be worked out and to be worked out through a rational process. These folks are still immune to that. I have said everything that you have said and then some. Nitan, clearly this is a more evidence of objectivists themselves only talking about the beam and leaving out the wider context. As I told them, they're dropping a massive context of not only Israeli history, but the history of nations and nation states in order to come to the conclusions that they come to. Have you had any confrontation with these kinds of objectivists?
Frankly, no. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just yeah,
lucky. You're
not
lucky.
seeing that. Yeah. Look, I mean, before October 7, I have to say, like, from a personal perspective, I was very distraught with Israel. Like, I was very I mean, I think I even came to the show, URCUK, and I talked about what was going on in Israel. And I said, look, it's becoming tribal, it's becoming collectivist. I mean, the political scene is just it's a complete mess. And I still think that. I still think there are some serious issues. Israel is kind of further down the mixed economy lane towards I don't know, some form of maybe dictatorship. But when you see October 7, I mean, it's a watershed moment. It's like, if you need some empirical evidence from reality to just remind you, wait a minute, you're still very far from just living in a completely barbaric totalitarian society. I mean, what more can you ask for? And you know, you see with Israel right now, actually, you see the kind of the good side of Israel. You know, you see soldiers, you know, just the complete bravery of soldiers, the way they're fighting, and you see the kind of benevolence of Israelis that are donating, and they're just helping each other out. And um, really, quite frankly, you just see the nicer parts of Israel. I mean, it's starting to crumble. You're starting to get back to the inner fightings of tribalists. But speaking of tribalists, I think these so-called objectivists, I mean, it sounds to me like they're tribalists. I mean, I don't know. I didn't encounter them, but this sounds like a tribalist mentality to me. It sounds like they just want to kind of jump on the wagon wheel of, you know, the new right, the alt-right or whatever, and the kind of far left that sees Israel. And you know, they also have this like conspiratorial kind of um, viewpoint, I think. I mean, it sounds like, you know, they're cherry picking on all these different historical anecdotes that, like you said, that they happen in every country. But it's more than that. It's like they can't differentiate between things that are. It's like they can't identify what is essential. And I think that is really the key here. You have to identify the essential in every case. You don't just, you know, cherry pick some things that happen on the side and that don't really define the whole or define the what's important about the issue. Um, so
Agreed. Agreed. Now, so let's move on to this little factoid of $250 million found
can I just
stashed
add
away.
one more thing? Sorry
Yes.
to interrupt. Can I just add one more thing about the ICJ? Um, so I mean, like we said, there's altruism that's the source of not seeing cause and effect, but there's also collectivism that just you can't see what's actually good for human beings. I mean, if you're a Palestinian, okay, an individual Palestinian, when was the best time that 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 you actually had? I mean, and I would argue, because you know, I mean, we've all seen those maps where they show the Palestinian territory allegedly, you know, diminishing over time, and and I'm asking, when in that period of time was it the best time for Palestinian individuals to actually live, flourish, and thrive? And I would argue that that time was after the 67 war, when Israel occupied the entire territory and there were no Palestinian territories, because then they had the rule of law. They could basically, all Palestinian individuals could drive wherever they wanted. They could work inside of Israel. I mean, their economy, you know, just it only benefited from the occupation. And Israelis, I mean, you know, just Israeli Jews would go to Gaza to grocery shop. So, you know, like, I mean, they could do those videos of Tucker Carlson, and you know, they go into the supermarket and say, hey, groceries are really cheap here, you know. And that was a really good time, you know, to be a Palestinian. But if you just view the world in terms of groups, and you think that land, you know, you view land as belonging to a collective, so you can't actually notice how these things affect the actual concrete lives of concrete real people. Um,
Yes, it seems like once you become a grievance group and you lose your moral agency and you expect the outside world to repair the grievance as opposed to taking moral agency and living your life, which they apparently did in 67, and they're not doing now, since they identify as a grievance group who needs to be nursed along by the outside community. Any further things anybody wants to say about this issue before we move on to the massive amounts of money stolen by Hamas and
Real quickly, somebody said to me on, I think, yeah, Facebook, that if Israel didn't behave the way they did, there would be no Hamas. To me, this is so absurd. Like, do these people think that if Israel wasn't there, the Middle East would just be a beacon of peace and freedom? Because when Israel left Gaza, the what's the name? I can't remember the name of the group that behind the PLO now, but they fought with Hamas. You've got
The
Kashmir,
Fatah, yeah.
Fatah, yeah. You have over there in Pakistan and India over Kashmir, they're fighting. The Iranians and Iraqis were fighting, the Shia versus the Sunni. You have the problem in Yemen. There's all, Al Qaeda, I guess, fights with ISIS. It's not like these are a peaceful people and they're just upset because there's Israel. They're a warring people. And anybody that's ever read the Quran knows that it talks about making war day and night and that type of thing. But back to your point originally, Mark, that you present these people with all the evidence and all the logic, they don't want to hear it. And I gotta tell you, like, my patience is like up with stupid people. I'm so fed up with dumb people, and I don't like to resort to insults in debates or discussions. But sometimes I just want to say, you're a dumbass and move on with my life.
I agree.
Spot on.
And
Spot on.
sometimes I do actually say that. I don't, I don't want to stoop to that level, but occasionally I do. Robert, so what do you think about this $250 million secreted away in 4 separate safes over there in Gaza? Is this a surprise to you?
Zero surprise, other than the fact that it wasn't already spent on weapons. But yes, if they are stockpiling aid money, now we see the photographs of Gaza. Even before the war, Gaza was no great shakes of a place to live. Bizarre because they're on the coast of the Mediterranean. We've said before, they should be like the Riviera. They should
Mm.
be a beautiful place. The point is, they're not. And they complain that they're not. So I'm not saying anything controversial. Well, where the hell did $250 million come from? And of course, we know the answer to that. It came from foreign aid. It came from international aid. It came from organizations like UNRWA. And is it feeding those starving children? Is it saving lives, as we're told needs to be happening right now? No, it was sitting in 12 safes in a bank, safes that were associated with accounts owned by Hamas. No, I have zero surprise. And my only hope is they will take that 1 billion shekels, $250 million. The IDF will take that and put it to good use. Or at a minimum, I suppose, for the sake of appearances, set it to the side, but they'll definitely make sure Hamas does not get their bloodthirsty hands back on it. I'm not surprised at all. And if I can say real quick, because I'm sure you're watching this too, but I've got to say thank you to Johnny Ruiz in the chat for the super chat. Thank you for the $3. Gail Parker is also in with $1.99. And I mentioned it because somebody in the chat said, well, what about that gear that you were talking about? What about that that Mark was talking about? And our producer has now put a link in the chat. It's a little bit of a lengthy URL, so definitely use that link and share it out. This is really cool. The produce stuff that Ashley Shrugged is producing. So
It's
thanks for
called
that.
Galt's. It's called Galt's gear. It's pro-capitalist stuff. We got some anti-commie stuff in there too. That Ashley is sort of the queen of phrases. She comes up with these great things we put, and she puts images. Her husband puts images on them, and they're funny. They cut right to the quick, right to the heart of the matter. And the freedom is real stuff that will all go to our cause in Israel. So definitely go for that. Natan, were you surprised at all that Hamas has secreted away $250,000? I mean, they have 250 miles of tunnels that no civilian is allowed to go into.
Yeah,
Only the
quarter of a
Hamas leader.
billion dollars.
Yeah, $250 million. Sorry, no, and they have 250 miles of tunnels that no civilian is allowed to go into to save themselves from the bombs, but the Hamas leadership can, of course, go through there with the hostages. What do you think of all this?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. I mean, if in the previous discussion we talked about alleged reparations that Israel needs to pay the Palestinians, so I think if anything, if any kind of good use this money can go to, is to pay reparations for the Israelis in the South that were their homes were destroyed and they were butchered and killed and raped. If anyone deserves that money, then that would be them. So
I'm also going to go for reparations for the 800,000 or so Jews kicked out of Arab countries who got their property stolen from them as well. I think they need reparations.
Yeah, I mean, if we go if we go back like that, then it doesn't end. But I mean, I am kind of curious about the mechanism of how it works because I mean, it is shekels what they caught there. So I wonder how all those shekels got in. I mean, maybe they take that as taxes. I don't know. I mean, we need some maybe financial expert to explain, but I'm guessing that they use most of this to buy ammunition and weapons. I mean, I don't know exactly how the mechanism of this works. Who do they send the money to in order to buy the weapons? Especially if it's in shekels, because I
Well,
don't know if you can.
they also use it for their palatial estates in Qatar and little boy masseuses, I'm sure.
Oh no,
Um,
that of course, yeah, for sure. But yeah, I mean, isn't it sick like to see you know an organization that's basically lifted itself on the just on blood, really, just on force, on just violent, brutal force, and and that's how they get their money. So I mean, and that just it's just sick.
so Michael, can you name the tech industry in Gaza that is bringing in all of this money to the Gaza Strip? Or is there a new
I,
PlayStation game that I'm not aware of
I,
going on? What,
I don't believe so. I mean, look, Hamas misappropriating funds from foreign aid, that's nothing new. It's not unique to Hamas. It happens very frequently with foreign aid and even with charities when the people send their money to other countries and the governments end up getting it and it doesn't go to the people. What I would really like to be able to do is talk to your average Palestinian and just ask them, you know, if they're when they're safe, so they don't have to worry about repercussions, and ask them, what do you think about this organization that's supposed to be defending you and protecting you, and really they're just getting rich off of you? What are your thoughts? And I would be very curious to see what the answer would be to that.
I wonder what it would be. Well, folks, any final things to say about the corruption of Hamas, the Palestinian society as we know it? Because I
I
think
have a
we're the
lot to
only
say,
ones.
but I'll keep it short.
Go
I want
ahead.
to know, and I'm repeating myself, but think about it. What is the most amazing skyline in the Middle East? You'd have to include Dubai, with the tallest building in the world and a shoreline of skyscrapers. One of the few Arabic nations that is willing to do at least something right. Of course, if you look, most of the architects they brought in were American. Whatever. There's money well spent. Why the hell does Gaza look the way it is? Well, people say, well, because they're oppressed, because they can't build anything, because Israel's keeping them down, and so they're all poor. Well, 12 safes with 1 billion shekels, $250 million tells me, no, that's not the answer. That is not the reason why one of the most beautiful shorelines on the Mediterranean Sea looks like the place that it looks like. No. Why doesn't the Gaza skyline look like Dubai? Why doesn't it look like the Riviera? Why doesn't it look like New York City? Now we've seen the pictures of the tunnels. You mentioned 250 miles of tunnels. Think about what a construction job that is. But even more than that, the early tunnel pictures we saw, including places where hostages were held that were uncovered by the IDF. Some of them look like you'd expect them to. They look like bomb shelters. Some of the pictures we're seeing look palatial. They're luxury tunnels. And you think of the kind of money, kind of engineering that went into that. Again, why the hell does Gaza look, even before it was bombed, like it was bombed out? Because $250 million sits in safe, and who knows how much more money was used to create 250 miles of tunnels instead of making that city, that strip, what it could have been. And
I
people
think just
want to
for some
blame Israel for this?
I think just for some perspective, I think I heard somebody saying the other day There's 238 miles of subway tunnel under in Manhattan, which is easily about 4 times the size of Gaza. So this was an amazing engineering feat that required quite a bit of money that could have gone towards creating industry in Gaza, creating infrastructure in Gaza, creating trade institutions with Gaza so that they could be open with other people and work towards actual statehood. But they decided to make war on Israel. That's their
you
focus.
talked about it. You talked about objectivists. We talked about objectivists, quote unquote objectivists, who are intrinsicists, who want to argue about politics and the way the objectivist movement is going, and it has nothing to do with how these people actually live their own lives. But ask yourselves this, folks: if you could do anything in your life, it's a great question to ask yourself as you're clarifying your values. If you could be anything, if you could do anything, what would you do? And think of all the possibilities that opens up. Well, if Hamas, if ISIS, if Hezbollah, if the Houthis, if Fatah could do anything they wanted, say if they had $250 million in the bank, what would they do? What the fuck did they do with those opportunities, with those resources, no matter what they think they suffered under the Israelis? What have they done? Look at the photographs of Gaza. And if you can stomach it, look at the photographs of October 7th. And then the ICJ, you tell me that Israel was unjust? That's all I've got to say about
What a
that.
travesty! What a travesty! I mean, there's
Yeah.
no more clear scenario that I've ever seen in history, and yet it's so obfuscated by these morons. What were you going to say?
I mean, you just have to be a little bit honest. And I'm sure that everybody can, if in a moment like of clarity and honesty, they would actually think about this. They know, I mean, people know that if the Palestinians drop their weapons, if the Palestinians renounce violence, there will be peace. Like it's that simple. But if the Jews drop their weapons, if the Jews, become pacifists, so they will get slaughtered. And that's
Agreed.
just the way, I mean, that's the truth. That's just the truth. And just one more point about the, all the aid going into Gaza. I mean, this shows you Ayn Rand, she has that really deep philosophical point about evil, that evil is not really evil in itself is impotent. I mean, they could not do anything without the world providing them with material value. I mean, they would just collapse. But it is here you can blame Israel and you can blame the world for manifesting and fostering this monster and letting it grow as it did. It is the good people that don't speak up and they don't, and they sanction evil, and that's when it grows and it becomes what it becomes.
Amen to
Um,
that. Amen to that.
yeah.
Michael, any final words?
No, I think everybody's pretty much covered it. Hamas sucks. They're a bunch of corrupt hooligans, and Israel's morally superior. And I don't know, how many times you have to say it before it's actually going to get through to some people, but I hope it gets through.
Well, let's hope too. Johnny Ruiz gave us $10 for Robert's righteous indignation. Thank you, Robert, and thank you, Johnny, for that. Well, we'll continue to cover the war in Gaza. We'll cover it from the unconventional perspective of objectivism, which I think is the best perspective out there that I've certainly seen or heard. And if you like this content, please like or subscribe, send it around, and also buy Galt's gear. Check out the link that Daniel left in there. Buy your pro-capitalist gear, your anti-commie gear, and Freedom Israel gear, and it will go towards a good cause, which is making Ashley rich as it should and making the IDF whole. So, all right, folks. So it was great talking to you guys. I hope to see you very soon. For you guys out there watching, remember to check your premises. Peace.